You know, when I think about this moment we're living through, I'm struck by a simple truth we don't always want to admit. Democracy, this grand, noble idea we like to celebrate in our speeches and our ceremonies, has always been more fragile than we pretend. It doesn't break all at once. It erodes slowly in the doubts we allow to linger, in the cynicism we begin to nurture, in the fear that maybe our voice doesn't matter anymore. And if we're honest with ourselves, most people overlook the quiet ways trust slips through our fingers when voting rights are chipped away, when peaceful transitions of power are questioned, when a neighbor becomes an enemy because an online headline said so. We start to wonder whether the system we inherited is still strong enough to carry us forward. And the real question, the one we're almost afraid to ask, is whether we're willing to protect the very thing we say we cherish most. Now, this didn't happen in a vacuum. Over the past years, we've seen the ground shift under our feet, technology accelerating faster than our ability to understand it, disinformation traveling farther than truth can keep up, inequality widening the distance between futures people can imagine for themselves. These forces didn't just disrupt our politics, they seeped into our relationships, our institutions, our sense of belonging. And in a world that moves this quickly, it becomes easy to feel unmoored, suspicious, impatient for answers that never come soon enough. Democracy, with all its deliberate steps and frustrating debates, can feel outdated against the speed of the crisis of the day. But the thing is, history has always tested democratic ideals in moments like this. Times when we had to decide whether fear would divide us or courage would bring us back together. And somewhere beneath the noise, beneath the headlines and the hashtags, lies the simple reality that democracy survives only when ordinary people choose to renew it again and again, even when it's hard, even when it's slow, even when it feels like the world is asking more of us than we have to give. When I was a young organizer on the south side of Chicago, walking into church basements with flickering lights and cold coffee, uh, folks weren't talking about political theory. They were talking about feeling unseen, about trying to raise a family in a neighborhood where the factory had shut down and the schools needed help. They were talking about fairness, dignity, the belief that if you showed up and worked hard, your community should work for you too. And I learned quickly that democracy wasn't some abstract promise carved into stone. It was a living thing made possible only because people who didn't have much still believed their voice had weight. I carried that lesson into the White House. In those rooms, you learn that power isn't a trophy, it's a responsibility. You learn that leadership means stepping into disagreements you'd rather avoid, listening to perspectives that make you uncomfortable, and trying, sometimes failing, to bridge divides that have hardened over generations. And I can't tell you how many nights I sat in the Oval Office, long after the West Wing had emptied out, staring at the words of our founding documents, remembering that they're only as strong as our willingness to live up to them. And so when we say democracy feels fragile today, what we're really acknowledging is something deeper about human nature. We crave certainty, we crave simplicity, but democracy asks us to live in a space where neither is guaranteed. It asks us to trust people we disagree with, to accept outcomes we don't always like, to protect the rights of those who have less power than we do. It asks us to choose patience when anger feels easier, to embrace complexity when the world keeps offering us convenient fictions. And that's the paradox. Democracy is strongest when we recognize its vulnerability, when we refuse to trade long-term stability for short-term comfort. Because once we stop seeing each other as citizens and start seeing each other as adversaries, once we allow disinformation to replace dialogue, once we let inequality convince millions that the system no longer includes them, the distance between democracy and something far darker grows shorter than we realize. But the opposite is true as well. When we choose to listen, to participate, to protect one another's rights with the same urgency we protect our own, democracy expands, it breathes, it recovers. It reminds us that freedom isn't self-executing. It's a practice we renew every day. So the task before us isn't to mourn the fragility of democracy as if it's a failing. It's to see that fragility as a call, a reminder that this project only works when we commit to it with our full selves. It's to accept that progress won't always come on our timetable, that setbacks are inevitable, that disagreement is not a sign of collapse, but of engagement. And it's to understand that hope, in this context, is not naive, it's strategic. It's the belief that with enough vigilance, enough empathy, enough courage to stand for the rights of all people, not just the ones who look like us or think like us, we can build something stronger than what we inherited. Our Constitution has never been a relic. It's a promise each generation must choose to keep alive. And that choice, right now, belongs to us. So the real question is, will we find the courage to protect what makes us free? Will we choose unity over division, truth over convenience, responsibility over resignation? And when history looks back on this moment, will it tell the story of a democracy that drifted or a people who decided it was worth fighting for?